Today, we are joined by Katie Ernst, who is an active member of the Chicago music community, both as a band leader and sidewoman and educator. She is co-leader of the adventurous jazz trio Twin Talk and has received widespread critical acclaim for her Dorothy Parker poetry song cycle, Little Words. She's a graduate of the Eastman School of Music and currently teaches at the Birch Creek Summer Jazz Program and directs the jazz ensemble at Wheaton College. Katie Ernst, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So excited we get to do this. I've had several people in and out of Chicago recommend you as a guest, so I'm thrilled to be able to do it now. And my first question is in regards to your pandemic activities. I saw that for like the good first 7 months or so, you were posting recipe recommendations and charcoal drawings of your friends, which is like the most wholesome use of time I have seen during the pandemic. So what led to that and what was that process like?
Wow. Yes, you are right. This is true. Let's see. So I had the recipe thing was an idea I had when I was in Mexico City for a Chicago-Mexico City music exchange, like the days leading up to everything shutting down. Like, I think I was on one of the last airplanes. But while I was there, I was hanging out with the musicians and we were just talking about food because it's, I think, a common crossover. And some people are saying they didn't cook very much. And I was like, oh, I should post some recipes and blah, blah, blah. And it'd be so fun. And so then when everything was really shut down and I was like, man, I bet a lot of people are having to cook food because just everything was so confusing. So I figured I would just kind of share the things that I make at home. And I asked my mom for some recipes. So it was a pretty wholesome intended sharing, but I think it also was just a way of feeling connected.
Yeah.
And, like you're not posting about gigs, and I certainly don't want to post about like, well, this is a bummer, so so that was that. And then for the charcoal drawings, that I think was just a bizarre choice that my husband and I made. We were sick of watching TV, as I'm sure a lot of people were at the time. And I had gotten a set of charcoals and paper from an art, it was like a benefit, and you get a grab bag of things. And so I got some charcoals. I am not visually art inclined at all. So that sat dormant for about a couple of years. And so we were just like looking around and we're like, I don't know, do you want to like learn how to draw with these fancy crayons? And it very quickly morphed into a very like rules oriented structural thing where we drew our friend Hunter Diamond and asked him to nominate the next person. And it went on for, many days. We have hundreds of them right now. So,
that's awesome. I'm curious how many didn't even make the cut. Like, are you still doing it?
Well, the part of our bizarre rules were that we had to post it. Well, no matter, like, we just, like, there was no redos, there was no like editing. So we just sat down, we'd draw our friend, and then we would share it that night. And we did that for, I think like we did probably, around 70 people.
That's crazy. And fans of the show, if they go through your Instagram, will recognize a few past guests. Michael Patrick Avery and Greg Ward both made the cut. And that's funny so like you weren't a big artist, visual artist, like going into this, and it was just like, I'm gonna post these all online.
I mean, if we all remember the dark earlier times, there was just it was so bizarre, and you were just in your house. And so I think this was a great distraction for us. And it was it's not like we were trying to recreate a gig setting, like, I think upon reflection, it was probably like we were just looking to, one, we miss our friends. So it was like a way of like thinking about and being connected to our friends, but also just like, this was something that was so low pressure. We'd never done it before. And it was just very amateur art project. So,
well, I imagine it was really fun. I found for me, like one of the most enjoyable things is learning a new skill and realizing like, oh my God, I can get better at things. And the drawings they're good for,
They
I
got
mean,
better. They
yeah.
did. Yeah, you can see the quality of our work. It goes on. I think
Hmm.
one of the things that we both noticed was like, wow, even without like no one was teaching us how to draw, or we weren't like getting instructions or anything. And we weren't really trying to improve, but just doing something every day, really,
Hmm.
you kind of just default into getting better at it. So that was a kind of like, wow, that's deep. All right.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, and then the funny thing is like there was a hard cutoff of on your social media. Was
Oh
that
yeah,
a intentional like breakup? Still at
off the
this
grid.
time off the grid, social media wise?
I no, I mean not intentional, but I just I don't know. I think I got bored of Instagram, so
Hmm.
um, I took it off my phone.
Okay.
It wasn't like a big like life decision, and I'm sure I'll be back someday. But just at this moment right now, I wasn't really doing much of anything productive on it. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's not like we can. Well, we're starting to, but you didn't really have gigs to promote on there.
Yeah, I didn't. I kind of use social media as not a super like, hey guys, here's what's going on. Like, yeah, it was probably more of a promotional tool. So yeah, I'll be back on it hard once I have something to sell to people. But until then,
Has it been
uh,
nice though, without it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we recently moved and we have a dog, and we're just living in this space bubble that is this weird moment.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel like I have plenty of things to do. I mean, I'm still snooping on Facebook. I'll scroll through,
Okay. Yeah,
but yeah, I just feel like I don't really have much to contribute right now.
I hear that for sure. Other than your accidental deep discovery charcoal drawing, have there been any particular things you've learned about yourself personally or musically and just life-wise during this past year that felt important?
I mean, yeah, I think this was a bizarre like slam on the brakes for probably everyone in our community. Like
Mhm.
there was this really dramatic taking away of what was a normal pace and livelihood and way of collaborating. Like everything was weird this year.
Mhm.
And so I think, I don't think it's unique, but I think I had a chance to just like really sit and think about what is it, what do I do? And, what is important, and what will stick once things resume, and what did I not really even want to be doing, but I was just doing for the sake of being busy. So I mean, for me, because I mean, I was healthy and I have the means to stay home. It like so much was fortunate in just my particular circumstance that I
Yeah.
can be like, oh, it was such a growth year for me. Like, and that feels so crumbly when like it's been really devastating for a ton of other people. But it just, for my circumstance, it was just like this moment of like bizarre sabbatical and pause. And
Mhm.
so um just the way I think about how I relate to music making and how I come to performing. Um, for a while I didn't play. Especially as a bass player, so much of my role and my like music making relationship is one of playing with people, and I had a hard, and probably you as a drummer too, right?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
it at some point, like practicing playing time, and just there's no one that you're playing with is soul crushing. So
Mhm.
so at first, there's like that head trip of like, if I'm not shedding, I'm not serious. But I think especially as you move further away from like the conservatory land, it's like there are moments of drought and there are moments of like fruitfulness in learning and playing.
Mhm.
And so think I got a little more like accepting of, there are going to be times that I'm really actively working on something, and there's going to be times that I'm not, and being softer about the being softer about that, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this year has been, I think, changing for everyone, like life changing for everyone.
Definitely.
Um, yeah.
I'm curious. I've been reading more about how a lot of times levels of well-being are more affected by things that you take out of your life than things that you add to your life. So I'm curious what those things that you said were things you were saying yes to in the past just because you felt like you had to or you needed to stay busy. What those things were, and if now, like, is your plan to stop saying yes to those things or just have a different relationship with them?
Mm. Well, the tricky thing is that um, I think there's such wisdom in learning by doing. Like I don't have regrets about being over committed
Mhm.
as a young person that was just out of college and like just kind of there. I think there's a time for that, or there can be wisdom to that. Like it's not an evil thing, and I would hate to see like people just out of school being overly confident in their sense of like what they need or to do or not do. Like
Ah, yeah, okay.
there's a certain amount of or at least I learned so much from doing too many things or too many different things, and then
Mhm.
kind of then there's the wisdom of whittling that down. So um I mean, I think in some ways I was pretty good about like being aware of like, all right, it's like don't miss out on an opportunity to do something. So I ended up kind of collecting a lot of small teaching positions at different
Mhm.
places, and kind of just filling the time that I had. Um, I am just a person that is I'm a busy bee anyway. Like that's just how I've always, even as a kid, I was like doing a lot of, so that doesn't feel bad to me. But now I think, I've been in Chicago for 10 years and I have kind of a sense of what my options are and what, the different places I can be or things I could play, that I'm just getting a little more discerning about, um, like what I add, or the music that I make.
Mhm.
uh, and I think that might just be a coming of age thing.
Y
Like even beyond just the pandemic thing, just I think as we get older and we learn more about ourselves, then it becomes more clear what we should be doing and kind of honing in. So I think it's time for my coffee delivery.
This is amazing.
Oh, hello. Why, thank you. There was my dog, Edie. There she is. She got 3 legs.
Oh, that's
She's so
awesome.
cute. Um,
Adorable for sure.
so I think for me, let's see, if I was to be specific, it's probably um, like I don't need to teach at 15 high schools,
Mhm.
like 3 students, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and in some ways, it's like that should be for the person that just graduated and needs to make some money. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, so I think in that way, I'm just kind of like focusing in on
That's cool to
where
hear.
I belong. Yeah.
Being in Chicago for 10 years, I'm sure you've really gotten to know the city, and if a musician were to ask you like, "Hey, I'm interested in moving to Chicago. What is the scene like?" How would you answer that question?
Oh, I'm like a college recruiter when it comes to Chicago. I am like on team. Everyone should just move on over.
Yes.
Um, I mean, for me, I did not know much about Chicago when I moved here because I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. This
Mhm.
was my like hometown big city, and I would go to downtown on field trips and like go to Millennium Park, and that was I didn't know really much about the history of the music community or what was actually happening at this time. And so I didn't even know I was going to stay here. But then I learned a lot about, well, I mean, just being, 21 and being able to be a part of the community in a meaningful way.
Mhm.
Um, there was something about the value systems here, in just its history of being not kind of doing its own thing. It wasn't on either coast and just had a chance to develop its own sound and kind of collaborative, free, improvised, but like strong, like feel and time value. There's just a certain Chicago aesthetic that it really resonates with me.
Mm.
And I felt very welcomed here. I felt like the way that people were thinking about music really resonated with the way that I wanted to think about music. And it seems like if you have a vision, you can execute it here. Like
Mm.
there's not a strong, like, I don't know, aesthetic demand. Like you can kind of people are open to whatever your dream is if you want to make it happen, kind of thing.
That's cool, because a
So
lot of scenes, like New Orleans, for instance, has a sound, and that is something like a strong thing to contend with if you're trying to do your own thing, and that's the identity of the city. And that's cool to hear that Chicago has more of an identity of letting people do their own thing.
I think so. I mean, or at least I've met little to no resistance in just
Mm-hmm.
in trying things or watching people try things. And yeah, there's really, it feels like there's a lot of creative room here, that really feels healthy.
Yeah, I like that. If their follow-up question was, okay, so I'm going to move there, what would you recommend I do, like, to make that move as effective as possible? Like, how do I get acclimated and join the community and get involved?
Mm. You got to go to the sessions and you got to go see people's shows.
Are there certain sessions? I mean, maybe the landscape has really changed over the last year, but are there certain sessions or like weekly gigs or like places where these communities can be found that you recommend?
Well, let me tell you a story about the old times and
Yeah.
we'll just hope that it will resume. But for a while, for the more recent old times, Monday nights at the Whistler was a session, and Tuesday nights at the Hungry Brain was a session, and then kind of throughout the rest of the week, there's lots of places I mean, like any city, there's like a
Hmm.
million things happening all the time. But I feel like just like the community aspect of it, is like just being around your community. And I don't mean like handing out your business cards, but I just mean like you go you go to the book club so that the people at the book club know who you are, and you develop relationships that are meaningful. So you go to the places where you want to play and you
Hmm.
develop relationships that are meaningful. um, and that would be the way to do it, is just to be around and to talk to people in a authentic way.
Yeah. No, I like it. I always am like trick myself into getting convinced that there's like some secret formula beyond that. And it's
Yeah.
always nice to be reminded it's just about going and making friends, you know?
And not making friends to serve your ulterior motives, right? Like,
Hmm.
and that it's so hard. And I see a lot of younger people like meaning well, but kind of missing the point. But it's also probably just a big life lesson too, right? Of just like you want to be a part of a community so that you can be known and grow and ba, 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 ba. But yeah, when you look at it as like, but you can get me like a gig, right? Like, no, you wouldn't want to be around that. Blah blah blah. I feel like that's being talked about more now, so it's kind of boring. But it's still true, and I still see it, so it's like, ugh.
Yeah, no, for
But
sure.
but it really is. I think also like having like a kind of a humbleness about entering a new community too, right? Like there's a lot to learn from people like Greg Ward when he
Hmm.
is playing in Chicago, and you can go check him out. You know, like and 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 really being kind of hungry for being around great musicians or great people, and like treating it as like, you have a lot to learn from them rather than like, well, yeah, I'm supposed to hang out with you. So that's how you do it, like,
Yeah.
and I think that mentality of like kind of like seeking mentors or having respect for the people that are making music that you appreciate is probably a good move.
Mm-hmm. And I'm determined to not do this my second time around. I'm moving back to New Orleans next week, actually. And
Cool.
there's a lot of pressure because not every scene's perfect. And when you show up as a transplant, you maybe have like a less invested perspective, and you can kind of see like, oh, there are kind of these things. And I was one of the people that was like, okay, well, like, we should change these things. And now I'm realizing like it is not my job to show up to some other city and like fix it. That is not like my role.
Yeah, it's so easy to identify problems and so hard to create meaningful solutions, like, and, I think I see that in like college programs where some people really identify a lot of problems and that is like their life's work at the school. And it's like a nice public service that you've done for an institution, but kind of might cut into your personal growth time or something. It's tricky. I think for me, like, you kind of just have to create an orbit of what you want, like the kind of community you want to be in, like
on a small scale.
Yeah. Or just, like, yeah, on a small scale, and it can grow, like, if it's a cool orbit, then other things will want to be a part of it, like, but finding musicians that you vibe with and, finding a place to make me like, yeah, I think we almost give too much credit to like the system when our little community is so small anyway, that like, if you started a session or you did a thing or you just like have a cool band, then that creates its own little swirl and becomes part of the identity of New Orleans or whatever, like,
Yeah.
And kind of like making room for what you want
That's
something to be.
No, I really like it. I like this orbit analogy a lot.
It's new. I don't know where it came from, but yeah.
So I'm going to reference a phrase I've heard you throw out, and I'm hoping you can talk about its origins and kind of the legacy effects that it's had on you. But it's a pleasant singing voice that is in tune.
A pleasant singing voice that is in tune. That was in reference to my piano teacher in first grade or something. And my mother was told by my piano teacher that I had a pleasant singing voice, I think. Is that what I was talking about?
Yeah. Well, and it seems like I'll just say I was not told that when I was young. And even now when I have interest in singing for a multitude of reasons, just to enjoy it more, right? It is very scary for me. And I have a mindset that is not, I have a pleasant singing voice that is tuned. It's the opposite of that. But it sounds like as you were going through your career so far, there were times where having this early on positive reinforcement made it easier for you to explore that aspect.
Yeah, it kind of was just like, I took that as like, oh, okay, cool. So I didn't really have much of a head trip about it. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I also am a fairly not self-taught, but like kind of self-propelled singing person. I had a few really key moments where I got good instruction. And a lot of it was just kind of like learning about how my instrument works as a vocalist. So I'm kind of on team, like, anyone can sing. You just have to learn the mechanics of it. And I heard one time that someone was like, unless you don't hear inflection in people's voices, like there are some people that like can't hear the tone of something going up as a question or being like, there are some people that can't hear that, and that would be being tone deaf. Right? Like there's like a specific thing that is, but most people are just like, I think not, I think most people can learn how to sing better than they currently can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope so. But
Yeah.
it is very hard when you're working against this reality in your brain. It's like, I'm not a singer. I can't sing. And then when you go to sing, that's all you can think about. It very much impacts your ability to do it, even though I believe also I'm in the team, anyone can sing.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious that now as an educator, how you balance that idea of like, you want to give people this mindset that they can do anything and they can sing, and balancing that optimism with maybe the truth of the moment that's like, well, you don't sound very good right now because you aren't doing these things correctly technically,
Mm.
How do you approach that?
Well, I mean, I've kind of reduced like the components of a pleasant singing voice that's in tune,
Mm-hmm.
down to like a lot of what makes people sound less convincing is vowel shape, like, and me teaching in the Midwest in Chicago, a lot of people's vowels are real smiley, and it's really easy to just fix that by changing the shape of the vowel. So I kind of, and that's really, I mean, and it's just, that's how I make sense of things, and that's how I worked on my voice. But so it's like, I think when you break it down into tangible pieces instead of this big like monolith of good singer, bad singer,
Yes.
then you're not judging it based on like, was that a good singing? Is that a good singing? It's like, did that vowel sound like an O or an ah? Or, like when I look in the mirror, does my mouth open or does it stay closed? And then you have more concrete things to gauge whether or not you're doing something right. And it's much more, that's a much more acceptable philosophy in non-singing situations, right? Like, are your hands curved or are they broken? Like, is your bow low enough or are you pulling the string hard enough? Like I think we think of singing as being this kind of mysterious, non-technical, you got it or you don't, when really it's this, like, you can look at it in the same mechanics way to feel like you have more control over it. And I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
big thing, is just like learning how to control the instrument that is a voice, um, instead of it being like this spooky gift from the Lord or not, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, I think most things, when we put them in this category of mysticism, right? And it's like you can't define it. Normally, that does not seem to be a good thing. It always seems to make it like this scary thing that you can't understand, and therefore it's like hard to approach. And there are a lot of things in music that we kind of tend to put in that category of like good and bad music and connection and soul and all these things. And it's cool to see that when you're like, well, maybe it isn't this magic. Maybe there are these components that we can figure out technically, and start to define this thing. I think it gets less scary and it's way more accessible.
Well, it teaches you the it's like it teaches you the skill of how to do something in order to like achieve that higher intangible. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like there's also I mean, we've all heard that like robot that takes the John Coltrane solo, right? Or
Right.
plays, you know what I mean? Like, or like, so there's not, I would never want to oversimplify it into like, well, you just do, like the following things and then boom, you're an important musical voice in
Hmm.
the human experience. But it's like, in order to even, like, there's two things at play. There's the intangible magic stuff that makes music important and essential in the human experience, and then there's the like, the personal journey of like, how do you wield this very important tool and how well do
Mm.
you know how to use it? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's these two kind of, uh, they go together. They can seem like they're opposites. It's but it's kind of like be scientific in how you learn how to use a tool, which is an instrument or a voice or a bass. But then like there is an intangible that it's like when that sense of authenticity or that spirit or whatever it is, like that
totally.
you can't manufacture, no matter how much we break it down. And that's why this is an art and not something else.
Okay. And that is totally the thing I'm chasing. And I think you're so right. It is this acceptance of maybe there's a greater thing to this than I can understand. But in the physical world, like I can do these things to access it in a real way. And I'm curious if there are any memories or moments that stand out to you, or lessons that you learned maybe that helped you understand and access that relationship more.
I've always thought of music making as being pretty heavy. I mean, like it's a very powerful thing. And my relationship to hearing certain music and playing music, there's a real serious surrender to this bigger thing. Especially being somebody that is playing improvised music or collaborative music, where there's lots of room for real-time changing and shifting, and like there's a lot of like giving up of control over a situation, but there's also a lot of power in being a part of this thing. So I have I think a pretty serious reverence for the like that intangible side, that really big kind of spiritual side to the music, that it's like I didn't do that, like a lot of it's kind of learning how to just let things happen instead of forcing an agenda. So I don't even remember what your question is, but I feel like a really strong, like it is a serious task and a big task that we take on as musicians, especially improvising musicians.
Well, okay, just to backtrack a second.
Yeah.
The letting go part sounds amazing. And I think I've had moments where I've done that, but it's not always easy. And like, how have you learned and continue to learn like how to let go in the moment?
Yeah. I'm the band I play in, Twin Talk. We talk a lot about this stuff, and kind of the structure of our band is kind of very focused around that idea of being open to things going in a direction that we've never done before, and kind of like really keeping our own agendas in check, but also being empowered to like move or redirect things as we feel. So I mean, it's such a head trip, right? Like making choices, but also wanting to respond to things that you're hearing, like having an idea, like
when you talk about it, it shouldn't work, but then you experience it working and you're like, okay, well, this is a real thing. It has to be, I know it is, but
a lot of it is, I think, learning kind of multiple ways of doing something, right? Like not just having one setting of like all my improvisations just build to this great big climax, and that's how I know how to end a song. Like and kind of being really aware of the different ways that something could go.
So like knowing all your options so that in the moment you can recognize kind of which option you're living in, so that you're kind of prepared to be in that moment.
Sure. Or having more options prevents you from like forcing a certain outcome just out of your own comfort.
Okay.
And just, I mean, like we've done a lot of things where it's like practicing having different people start a piece, or saying like seeing how far you can go with one thing. kind of basically not being so scared of like, is this good or is this whatever? Like putting yourself in situations where you're actually practicing and like being in a certain texture or a zone, and kind of waiting until the music really tells you what is coming next. I mean, that's kind of that's the big mystery part of it, but it's just kind of learning how to put your own agenda or what, like head trip in check, and really being in a moment musically and following where that wants to go. Because if you are patient enough, it's like it becomes very clear what should happen. We've all experienced some of those moments, where it's just like, oh, it just unfolded, and it just felt like, yes, of course, that's the right thing to happen. And it's kind of learning how to be in that space, and that takes a long time. I think that will take my whole life, but a lot of it, I think, is kind of checking what you're like. Are you making this choice out of fear? Like, I'm afraid to stop playing, or I'm afraid to blah blah blah, or does it really feel like the music is calling for that? Or like, and so some of that is like just having enough confidence in your choices that that if I decide to come in, then I'm here, and that was a good choice to make, and I can have that conviction and contribute that.
Is this reflection on, okay, why am I making this choice? Which I think is awesome. Is that something that's kind of happening in real time that you're monitoring yourself, or are you recording and then going back and talking through it as a band and seeing, or just on your own of then identifying, why did I do that?
I think it's more it's like the real time decision making,
Okay.
where it's like, are you really in this moment, or are you worried that the song's feeling a little long, or like, are you feeling like I haven't used the bow yet this set, so maybe I should show that off. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
A lot of like being. It's like, is this combination of like being much more self-confident, right? That whatever I contribute will be worthy, blah, blah, blah. But also like much more selfless, where it's not about demonstrating your skill set or being impressive or I don't know, anything that's not just like, well, we are in this current moment and in this texture, and it is unfolding in this way. So yeah, that's kind of what Twin Talk is.
That's awesome. Is there anything you do that helps you get back to the moment when you catch yourself like, I am making a fear-based decision or not serving the music? Like, do you have anything that brings you back to the space?
Well, I think it's easy. It's easy to like get back into that, like, I'm like, I'm analyzing.
Yeah.
Well,
you're afraid, right? And then you are analyzing yourself. Now you're like, critiquing yourself for doing that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that probably will come with, as I become like this old, wise sage woman, and I'll just be like super like balanced. But, I mean, a word that comes up a lot is just like unfolding, like letting something unfold. So I think, a general tendency is probably to like hurry through something, or to like, I've been playing this beat for a while, I should probably change it. Like there's this sense that something might be too long, or it's like this desire to change too soon. And it's probably better to just like wait and let it unfold. So like kind of hold and like re-enter what is happening, and then let it move from there. Is I think probably the more consistent issue, rather than it's been happening too long and you should change it up.
Is this space that we've been talking about related to or different from musical conversation, which I know is something you're into and you've talked about as being a big part of the genesis of Twin Talk? Are those the same thing to you, or is when you think about musical conversation, is that its own different thing?
Well, I don't think it's it's not like I play a thing and then you play something back to me and then I'll play a thing. It's not like we're not like trading fours necessarily, right? But I think it's one of the cool things about music is that it's its own thing and it's not talking, it's something else. So I think in some ways it's like things are happening at the same time, right? Like we can both be doing something in a song simultaneously, and we can respond either by changing or by staying the same. And it's that kind of how things are related, even if they're not like directly, I don't know, it's not like you play something, I play something. But I think it's just being aware of like each thing impacts the other. And it doesn't have to be the same amount of interaction. It could be that I'm in stasis and you are doing something very dynamic and different. Like there's plenty of different combinations of how you communicate with each other. But it's just kind of, maybe it's more of like being aware that you are part of this bigger thing that's happening and that things are affecting each other. Ecosystem vibes, rather than like, I play loud and you play loud, and then I'll play soft and then you'll play soft. Like there's all these different, there's this big spectrum of interaction that's still still converse, us being in a room together and ignoring each other is still like something is being communicated, I guess, like,
becoming aware of these different connections and relationships on the bandstand and just how many of them there are is so powerful. And one thing I have to remind myself all the time is that I don't have to say anything to be listening.
Yes.
I oftentimes am like, well, I'm sitting in somewhere and I want the band leader or the pianist or whatever is going on to know that I'm listening. So I'm like filling every space. And when I hear him playing those quarter note triplets, I am on top of those with him. And then realizing like how exhausting that would be in a conversation if every time someone goes to talk, I'm like trying to finish their sentence for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think of kind of like think of relationships, right? Like people that you just meet, you're probably more likely to have like nervous, continuous small talk, right? It's just like, oh, and what do you like to do? Or like, oh, cool, yeah. And people that you are really comfortable with, or sometimes conversations that are really fruitful, or not even conversations, just like interactions, often have much different structures. Like it might be that you are just both sitting in the car and driving for hours and not much is said, but there's this sense of like, that's my best friend that I'm driving next to, or so, you know what I mean? Like, and there's like a certain piece to that is beautiful. And that's like a way of being connected and communicating, whatever. Or there might be like, I don't know. I think there's so many shades, and like, there's so many gradations of communication and interaction beyond just the back and forth, or beyond just the loud and soft, or like, and the more that you're aware of those things, I think it allows for you to be able to access those things.
I like that.
Yeah.
You said it briefly, but you said your band kind of talks about these things similar to what we're talking about now, like what makes music special, how do we do this really well? Are you still having those conversations together? Like, do you instigate those actively to explore how to do this? I guess I ask because I've been in groups where maybe the band leader has a very specific idea of what makes music special, and we're just all supposed to know what that is and to be able to do it for them. And our versions of what make music special or whatever aren't included in this idea that we're trying to present. And I'm like, is this kind of a communal exploration of like, how do we accomplish this thing for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, in Twin Talk, yes. It's a kind of a continuing active dialogue of how are we, Are we sticking with the mission? Are we on are we on track?
Yeah.
But there are other times where it's like you're the actor in someone else's play, and you have to, and if you believe in what they've created, then yeah, it's like that's the role that you are gonna do for them. But if it grates against what you believe is good music, or if it's just not, if that's not who you are, and there's other people that could fill that role, then you don't have to be in that band.
Right.
And I think that might be some of the editing that happens as time goes on. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like, yeah, your job is just to like, they want you to swing and make it feel good, and that's what you're going to do in that band, and it's going to be awesome.
Totally.
So it's like, it doesn't have to be like you're either playing free, totally improvised, or you're in this horrible box and not being able to be yourself. There's like, again, with the gradations and like a spectrum of things, there's a million ways of being super free and being super swinging, or be, you know, like that's kind of the fun part of this music, I think, is there's different ways of doing it.
For sure. I'm curious if in these Twin Talk conversations, if there was a time that came up where, and if you don't have a specific memory, that's okay, but where a member brought up a point about making music, or like, this is why music is special to me, that you hadn't considered before, that was a big maybe direction change, or accessed one of these new relationship points in making the music.
Yeah, I think I do have one. So I did the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program back in 2013, and Jason Moran was it was his first year of being the director of that program, and he blew my mind, as he did everyone's mind, and just was a really inspiring, just like creative force and presence. And the faculty included Taurus Mateen and Nishi Wait. So it was Jason Moran's bandwagon was like, and this is what it is, like a great role model for like a collaborative, like really like long-term musical relationship kind of band, where they have such trust, and they have such, or just a history with each other. It's a really great role model for young people, you know, like starting in this music. So that was really helpful for me to witness and just watch them be together, and watch how they approach music, and watch how they talk to each other. And there's everything about it was really like, whoa, I soaked up a lot of just observations. And I saw the freedom in which they were all themselves, and not like particularly, they're not the same kind of person. You know, it's like those are three very different, strong personalities. And the way that they came to making music with each other, and just the way they were with each other. And I brought that back to Twin Talk for a rehearsal. And at the time we were making set lists, and we were kind of getting into kind of like, this is our set that we play, and things were starting to feel formulaic, you know, like there's always a bass solo in this song, and then this song starts like this, and blah, blah, blah. And I had just been around these like super kind of loosey-goosey genius people. And so I was like, well, I saw these people, and they were like kind of doing different things all the time, and I thought it was cool. So I told Dustin and Andrew about it, and I was like, man, that's just the way they were, and it kind of feels like what we want to be doing, and yada, yada. The thing that I brought back was the idea of, and I've since trademarked the term, but blind, sloppy trust.
Blind, sloppy trust.
Yeah. And it came from watching how all of these program participants, like myself, we were asked to play together on the first day, right? Like, so it's like all these cats coming and like showing their, like treating it like an audition, like, and then we all got yelled at immediately for being like not playing music, right? Like being self-absorbed and not like trusting each other and making good music.
So most jam sessions.
It was kind of like that, right? Like the yucky side of that. And so my, like the takeaway was like if you treated people who you were just first meeting and playing with, instead of making choices based on like, I don't trust that they actually can play, or I don't trust that they would be on my level, or I don't trust that we could really take things in a different direction because, you know, we're just learning each other, blah, blah, blah. Like you wouldn't want to blah, blah, blah. But if you came at that first interaction with like, I'm like, this is my favorite band and we play all the time, and like just allowing for the possibility of something more kind of risk takey or just something else than the obvious to happen, then at least there's a shot that it could, you know what I mean? Like you're
Yes.
not being so edited that you don't even allow for that to happen. And so that kind of was a big thing that I took away, was this idea of like, what if I played with these people? Like I blindly, sloppily trust that it's going to be awesome. And, or that I can play what I'm hearing, or that, you know, like that the drummer knows where beat one is. So we can just keep it going. You know what I mean? Like there's so much like reaction to things where we aren't trusting that people know what's going on or something, that it just kind of limits the possibilities that we have. So that was a big thing from that program, was blind, sloppy trust.
I really, really like that. And it just hits a chord with me because I feel like there's this weird obsession with adulthood about how so many times maybe an obsession with being right, and being right most of the time means assuming that this isn't going to be a good experience, and you go into all these things of like, this won't be good. And when someone new shows up on the bandstand, it's like you're kind of assuming they won't have their stuff together so that you're playing limited. And so many things are like, you hear like, this song's on the radio, so I just assume it's going to be bad before I even play it. And a lot of times you're right. And it's like, you'd rather be right than optimistic that even if I'm not right, this could be way better than I ever imagined. And it does seem scary. And I'm sure you're not always correct. Like you give out trust and it doesn't work out, but it certainly seems like a more enjoyable way to play, to hope that this is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And that's kind of the sloppy part, right? Is that it's like, you also are acknowledging that like, this might be not, like we might not go anywhere with this, but it's that, that hope, or that allowing for at least the possibility, you know what I mean? Like, if you're putting, I don't know, it's in some ways it's just like you're putting the music over other things, like, and even people with a different experience level, or coming from a different reference point, I think if you bring a certain strength and investment into a song, you can even kind of like pull people over into the side of good, you know what I mean? Like, some people can just be along for the ride, but that I think has been a really helpful way of not getting dark about things, is that it's like each time you play, it could be this new wild ass thing.
I like it so much.
Yeah. We'll get the shirts printed. But yeah, so it's, and being less precious about things, but also there's this, I think there's always this pull between like, it's this and it's also this, but being less precious about how people perceive you as a drummer or as a bass player, and just being more open to serving whatever that moment is, kind of frees you up to not have to be in this constant state of like proving yourself worthy,
right,
or doing what you think people will find acceptable, and just kind of, it's like, if the music doesn't want a bass solo, I don't need to take one just to prove I can take one. You know what I mean? Like the why is a big thing for me, is kind of, does this actually serve a musical function, or is it just a personal, like, I need my time too. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think my always temptation is to ask like, okay, is this serving the music like, how do you answer that question? But I think the important thing is just to be asking it, just to like, and you can decide on your own, but sometimes we stop asking that question and we just do things by default or for other reasons. And I think if, don't hold me to this in 5 years, but at the moment, I feel like a good thing to be thinking about while you're playing often is that question. You know, if you're going to have something in your head, is this serving the music? Seems like a good one to pick.
Yeah. Yeah. The why. It's all about the why.
Well, Katie, this has been amazing. I'm all about it. Before we're done, if there's any certain thought that you feel compelled to share just on wellness or happiness and enjoying this journey as a musician that you'd want other musicians to experience, you're welcome to share.
Wow. That's like too much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I don't know. I mean, for as much as what a strange path we've chosen as music makers, and there's a lot of obvious challenges and hardships and just like nastiness in this life path that we're taking, but also it's such a a beautiful privilege to be part of such a mysterious thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in navigating those things, being kind of reminded of how just spooky and beautiful the act of music making is, and that it's so, the pull is so strong that we deal with all kinds of things in order to make it happen. That in itself, I think, is just worth noticing, and that what rich and strange lives we live. You know,
Yeah.
it's just something. There's something very profound in the calling that we all have.
Mm-hmm. Well, Katie, you're wonderful. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I've had so many friends speak highly of you, and it's just been great to hear your thoughts. So thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. What a blast.